Welcome to the MD podcast with me, Martin Hartley, the Commercial Director of Imagine. We're a professional services consultancy specializing in high-value, low-population SMEs into the banking and financial services sector. Being a leader within the world's leading financial organizations is aspirational. However, few people make it to the top. The Imagine podcast will offer interesting, insightful, and frank discussions on the biggest issues facing divisional leaders. The show aims to inspire and educate future leaders by telling the career stories of those of today. I can't wait for today's episode. I'm joined by Dax Grant, CIO of Global Operations at HSBC. Welcome, Dax.
Thanks, Martin. Really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, me too. So Dax, obviously we've chatted briefly previously, and for the listeners, they know we look at the past, the present, and the future. With yourself, obviously coming in at that C level, speaking to the MDs and the next generation of people coming through, I'm really interested today to pick your brains at that leadership aspect at a C-suite level and creating those environments. Obviously, along the way, we'll talk about other things as they come in as well. But first and foremost, we will go back. We're both from sunny Nottingham, so tell me a bit about your upbringing and your parents and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. Was brought into a small village in Nottingham, Eastwood, which was the birthplace of D.H. Lawrence. So I remember following that blue line as to all the places he lived. My mother was a shepherdess, and then she retired and looked after the family. Family was the number one job. My father was a coal miner down the pit for 35 years, so a lot of respect. Really good family values, and yeah, just knew how to set up an environment and let someone thrive. So yeah, pretty grassroots, but really exciting actually from there.
Excellent. Yeah, no, it's I'm sure you knew Mr. Dean's dad, probably, with the whole Torval and Dean Nottingham aspect of it.
Pretty good.
Looking at that, it's something you mentioned there already, your mindset's there I can think about, which is great, about setting up the environment for people to prosper. So we'll touch on that shortly. Where was your route into finance then? Was that always a dream of yours? Was it a passion of yours? Did you know anything about finance being from Nottingham growing up then, or where's the thought process led? How did you get into it?
I kind of just explored the things that I enjoyed. So I found that I was quite okay at school and sort of explored. I didn't have a particular view in finance itself, but I had a very quiet childhood, and so particularly in my younger years, I sort of found myself listening to my inner voice and honing my own mission. I didn't know that I was doing that, to be honest. So when I sort of got into sixth form, they got me to write this mission statement. And I dug out the book actually a couple of years back and just smiled. But it was all about making an impact in the financial world and making sure I looked after my family. So years on, yeah, I think I'm true to that mission. Did I know I was going to do that at the time? No way.
Nice. Okay. And had there been any other family members that had gone into finance, or anybody that you looked up to that was close to the family, or teachers from school or something? I'm always intrigued as to how people even know what finance is. Like, obviously, apart from you see the bank on the local high street in Eastwood.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, no one specifically within finance or financial services. I mean, I did have a sort of distant cousin that was in one of the Serbo-Croatian banks, but I wasn't that close to her. So majority of my family, in Bosnia, they'd gone through all the upheaval, all the movement of homes and all of those sorts of things. So it was more from the position of having nothing. And whenever I went back to visit my family roots, everybody would just give you absolutely everything you ever dreamed of and more. And it's because they had nothing. They didn't want anything financial. And almost it was the juxtaposition of all of that kind of went, there's something special about that whole thought process, that whole way of being. And really, it's the complete opposite that drove me into financial services. And so it's about making that difference for folks wherever they are. It happens to be finance.
Yeah, people first is a nice mantra to take. Okay, so you go off to university. You do really well at university. Your educational career is glittering and speaks for itself. Obviously, everyone can check that out on LinkedIn, but it's to say you did okay is probably a slight understatement. And then looking at your entry job, so entry job into finance was Barclays, and you went in and you said to learn about the customer. So tell me a bit about that experience.
Yeah, so I mean, you kind of go into university or that kind of secondary state where you post sixth form, and folks kind of offer you lots of different opportunities. But you know, I was offered the world of consulting and all sorts of different worlds, and actuarial, and you know, the analytics. But actually, I thought I can't go and profess on these things until I really understand what it's about. Who are we working for? What is it? What's the value? Why would our customers care? And so, because you know, Barclays were fantastic. I had a fantastic set of interviews with Barclays. I remember sitting down with one of the regional managers as well, this director, and you know, just the conversation, the interest in sort of pulling me in. It was a really unusual conversation, but I knew I'd got that job before anyone offered it to me. And I was so excited about it because I was learning about how the world worked, how financial services really was an enabler to all of those things in life that everybody wants, whether they're in a personal financial relationship or in a business relationship. And therefore, Barclays offered me, it was the Barclays World of Opportunity then, it's now the HSBC one, but to be able to go and look after our personal customers and look after a branch and learn how to look after the safe and all of those things, be a cashier, and then move into relationship management in our corporate portfolio, just a different customer set. And I knew that I wanted to learn about all of that before I got into technology or anything else.
Okay, so you're starting to get a grounding around financial services and the offering then, and then where did the interest from tech spark? What made you move into that world?
I always loved technology, and I knew it would have a stronger and stronger role in my life. I loved learning how technology could redefine the way things were thought about, and also the ease with which it created things in life. So things that you would take a lot of time on, if you utilize that technology correctly, actually that would minimize that time and you could spend your time on more value-added activities. But it was really, the differential for me was it wasn't the technology itself. I loved to program, you know, build PCs at home with my family for my son and all of those sorts of things. But really it was how technology is harnessed for the societal, for the business interest, and how that really adds value, and how it's important to have a balance of technology in life, because like anything, technology can be a good force, but too much technology, equally, we don't want that. We want to make sure everybody's social, you know, our families are looking after relationships. So it was really the balance of all of those things.
Were you building PCs and coding before university? Are you true techie, geek at heart, or did that come a bit later?
Well, it came a little bit later, actually. I just started to explore, and I mean, as I say, my first interest is really in people and how it all sort of sits and fits together. I did do a little bit of code when I was younger, but I didn't sort of rush into all of that because it was really important to understand why code. You know, what code, why code, and the thing is, in today's industry, there's so many different standards and things. It's being really clear on which code. And how all that fits together. So I wanted to spend some time exploring all that before, you know, sort of going into deep tech.
Okay, nice. Okay, and so from this, obviously, you're going on your career path, your career journey. I'm gonna take you up to Barclays now, head of digital transformation, MD level. You got there pretty quickly. What were the key learns or the things that you did differently up until that point in your career that we can take as tips and hints for the audience listening?
So one of the key things for me, I don't know if it's different or not, but it's certainly one of the key things for me is being able to sit in every seat. I love sitting in any seat in the organization to understand that particular perspective. So, you know, whether that's from a commercial business perspective, whether that's from a technology perspective or from an operations perspective, and being able to understand those different views and then bring them together in a digitization, in leading a business or a function, really was the differentiating factor. And it wasn't for any one area. When I was in marketing, I got my product qualification. When I was in tech, I got my tech qualifications. When I was in operations, making sure I'd got the ITIL, but ultimately, coaching, the MBA, all of those things. And I wanted to make sure I'd kind of reassured myself, not only by I love learning on the job, but I love reinforcing what I do with making sure that I know my profession. And actually, I found that my profession is actually understanding business, understanding where value comes from, and then putting the chemistry of the team together behind all of that. But I didn't know that until I sat in every seat. And some people do that, but I really do that in earnest. And I love putting all those views together. And eventually, when you find people have got different views, actually you find you go into a common goal. And if you've sat in those different seats, it's so easy to bring folks to that common goal. It's actually really exciting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Did you know you were doing that? Did you think, okay, I've got the end in mind here and I'm going to work backwards? Or were you just really inquisitive and you thought, right, I'm going to go and have a pop at that. I'm going to now have a pop at this. I'm now going to do this. What was the thought process there?
I got a lot of feedback early on in my career, which said, you really know how to put all this together. Think about how you bring people with you and how you do that in different ways. And I did reflect on that at the time, but as I kind of did my own personal internal work going forwards, then I internalized that more and more. And that whole statement meant something different to me. So the ability to bring folks with you on that journey and create that journey together, but also, I've done a lot of work on the Strengths Finder model, which is part of my sort of core belief and mindset. So all of that together, I guess it brought a different depth to that whole piece of feedback that I always go back to and look at, how do I deepen that again?
Okay, two really interesting parts there. You talk quite a bit about bringing people with you on that journey. What are some techniques that you use to do that?
I don't have many techniques. I like to get to know people.
Yeah.
I generally don't do techniques and tools, but I like to get to know people. I like to understand where they're from. I realize sometimes in life, things get busy. You don't always get the chance to, but eventually you get to know folks around you, and the word spreads. And really, it's through that set of conversations. I remember, a little while back stepping into Macmillan's cancer support. And, one of the first things I did was bust the myth that I was this banker that was going to, change the whole charity to someone who really cared, wanted to know how things work and make things better and really drive for the cause. But, my first job was to spend a lot of time with my folks and my people, my team, my peers, my stakeholders. So I just threw myself into doing that quite quickly. And I guess through the other things in life, I absorb information quite rapidly now, a very sort of immersive approach. So it doesn't take long. Whereas, when you're first practicing, you have to practice your art, don't you?
Yeah, completely. And then you mentioned the Strength Finder model. Tell us a little bit about that and how you use that.
Yeah, I mean, that's really key in every conversation, really. And I do, again, it's about reflecting, rebasing all the time. But there's many different techniques in terms of leading folks. And, everyone sort of sits down with a development plan. But I'm a true believer that you have to understand what the strengths are. You have to make sure, if there's any sort of relative weaknesses, you're aware of those, and that you build your team accordingly, and your boundaries and all of those different things. But the stronger and stronger that model got in my mind, the clearer building teams became. So it's putting strengths at the heart of things. And my belief is, when you look at a person, you first see their strengths. You can see all sorts of different things about everybody, and I include that about myself. And I'm very realistic and will also bring that down. But it's really important to keep bringing it up back to strengths and really looking at how to capitalize on that, and also how to enable those strengths to flourish, and balance the other things out. But you really have to know who you are, and you have to deepen that every time you have a conversation.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. I like it. So talk us through your first C-level role, and what was the difference between making that step up from MD to C-suite?
You're gonna laugh at me now. There was no difference. There was no difference because I didn't see a difference. it was my next job.
Yep.
So
And
that
most
was
of the time you've been doing the role you're about to take before you get it, right? To prove you can already do it. So
absolutely, yeah. I mean, you've got it spot on. So there was no change, there was no differential. I didn't suddenly, it's a bit like when you get married, people go, well, now you're married, does it feel different? Well, no, not really, because I was always married. It's just we needed the ring. So similar sort of thing with the C-suite. You get into that role, you really, and people go on all these leadership courses and all of this sort of immersion, but it is that personal journey with yourself. I cannot emphasize that enough. And I remember when in the early days, and people would say that to me, and I'd kind of rationally internalize that, but did I really internalize that? Probably not early on, right? That's the honest answer. Did I internalize it later? Yes. But will I internalize it at a deeper level again? Yes. And so I guess it's that continuity mindset and knowing, if you can put teams together that can deliver different things, very, very exciting. I do remember when I was at Visa, and one of the things we looked after was as a team getting the technology into the Olympic Village, so all the contactless suites, all of those different things, and it wasn't simply ourselves and the technology team at Visa, but it was working with LOCARG, all the different areas, and putting on a amazing world event because of all the coordination, all the conversations, all of those different things. So being able to access that side of things is really where it comes into play. And it doesn't matter what level you're at or where you're at, but bringing people together for a tremendous goal, that's really exciting, and the rest of it just happens.
Yeah, obviously with something like the Olympics, it's pretty easy to have that one common goal, that golden thread, and it's to an amazing event, which you can all reflect on and say, I played my part in that, which is great. How does that differ for then just I shouldn't say run of the mill, but just a typical project within a bank where it's not really sexy and it's not the Olympics, but we need that one common goal. We still need the same commitment and drive.
Oh, well, this comes back to one of my teams, actually, one of my run teams has just won a HSBC recognition for their run service. And, I celebrate them because not only are they digitizing and moving forward, but they've kept that focus on their self-disciplines, the way that they run that operation, effortless days of perfect service. And that's due to that particular team, their diligence, and the way that they work. And I do believe it's really important to see the excitement and keeping the lights on, having that self-discipline, but also keeping that and then evolving at the same time. And that is really a mindset. So folks that are able to work and operate in both environments are really, folks that are very strong and will do very, very well in life. And that particular team, we celebrate how they've achieved that continuous service, and that they were nominated for that award. They didn't even know they were nominated. It was just their service sort of led, and then they found out they won the award. So it really does make a difference. And the things that folks might think, actually, this is a day-to-day thing, we celebrate it massively. And it is the balance of, I guess it comes back to values and personal mindset, and the balance of recognizing change, evolution, transformation, digitization, but equally in balance, celebrating the ability to have that continuous resilience and service. And there's so many companies and firms and teams and functions that I come into that almost go, yeah, well, we do keep it all running, but hey ho, I'm kind of, I know you keep it all running, that's really cool. And so I guess you kind of have to portion the balance across the two. And we certainly within my function make a real concerted effort to recognize both sides of that coin.
That's nice. So essentially what we're saying there as well is, you've got the one common goal, but it's actually doing a check and balance within, obviously if you get to a point where you win an award, great, we're going to celebrate that. But it sounds like you guys celebrate that much earlier anyway. So it's celebrating the small wins, which are not necessarily just small to everyone, but it keeps that mindset positive, keeps everybody going on the same page, right?
Definitely. And it's celebrating the local wins, the family wins, or, someone's announced an engagement, or, all of those things make a huge, huge difference. And so, when the team's focusing on the big things, I'm focusing on the small things. And when the team are looking after the relationship, I'm taking it to the next dimension. So you got to know your part in the team and where the team is, and really, you have to move with the team wherever that's at.
Okay, so taking that into consideration, and one thing we mentioned earlier is about the environment and the environment setup. You mentioned your father created a great environment for you all to thrive, and that's obviously part of your role at C-suite. How much involvement do you have with your senior leaders? Do you give them loads of space, a little bit of space? How does it all work? How does that environment setup work?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So environment very much comes from who you are, and when you're in any leadership position, everyone picks up on who you are, where you are, and what that environment's all about. So you're always sensing that, you're always sort of making sure it's in the right place. I would take a sort of a variety of different stances, and I know you sort of recognize my dad, but it was my mum that gave everything up. It was my mum that my mum was selfless, absolutely a selfless woman. And, she didn't go for any large job. She, she was a shepherdess, and then she devoted herself to the family. And do you know what? That's one of the best leadership things I've ever seen. And in society, we totally underestimate that, but actually that is so powerful. And so I guess, that has sort of embedded in my leadership style. And I certainly don't get it right all the time, by all means, and my team will always help me with feedback and things, which I love that feedback, and I love to get it so I can action it and sort of help even more. But I will come in, understand, people know that I'm supportive, but they also know that I do have a set of clear delineations and a set of standards, and we'll always talk about that and sort of re-emphasize that. And I will assess where the team sort of heartbeat rhythm is as well. So if we need to deal with something quite quickly, I feel the team's got the talent, the capability, and we can do that, I will take an empowering stance, make sure I'm the coach, create that environment, hold it, and just sort of create that reassurance for the team. If I feel there's something where maybe the team is not at that state of readiness, then my internal gut feel would feed that back. And, in that situation, I will take charge, but I will let the team know I'm taking charge of this because of a particular reason. It's particular poignant because of this, and this, and we need to action it now. So you're going to find me leading from the front on this one, but I'll be very, very clear, and they'll know that, when that piece is completed, then I'll lead from a different position. So I tend to articulate that, so at least they know where I am. Mm-hmm. And that also helps, so they know when I'm actioning something because I believe it needs urgency. And I can either create that in the team, but sometimes you do have to lead by example. So it's important the team sees that as well. And then, you learn through feedback, and, you get kind of different feels from different environments, and, that all then blends. And as the team, as you as a leader step into a position and the team gets to know you and vice versa, that trust builds up quite quickly. They get to know you, and then you sort of, you find your flow. And, I'm a great believer in connecting folks up with what they're interested in, that adds value to the company as well. So all of that kind of adds up, and somewhere it all works itself out, I guess.
Yeah, there's a couple of points from there. One of the pieces of advice I was given, I managed 3 teams at Imagine, and one of the pieces of advice I was given early on in my career was just be authentic. And I think that comes across really well in yourself. It's like you clearly care. And then I think if you clearly care and you naturally care, it's not just a, hey, I work in the front office and I'm told I should care about my team, so I'm going to pretend I care. It's like with a genuine, how are you? And you're actually listening back. I think that goes a long way. The second point in what you've said there as well, another tip, I think naturally everyone looks for communication and says it's really important, but it's that the setting out the rationale, the genuine communication of the why, where, how, what, when, the actions required. And just being clear and honest with that communication, and the two-way pieces of communication with the feedback that you mentioned there as well. So I think some really good points in that. Thanks. One aspect that you mentioned there, so you mentioned your mother and what she gave up. I want to speak to you about your personal side as well. So I think obviously we mentioned previously you've got 2 children. So tell me a bit about that, and being an executive leader, C-suite at HSBC, but still being a mum of two and having your own family?
Yeah, and let's make this clear. I put the mum of two first, and if they're happy, everything else works. So that's how it works. However, I love what I do in industry and business, and we've got to a point where my family will smile at me, but my children sort of say to me, Mum, the more you are you, the more we are us, and it's really important for you to go and do these things because you flow when you do all of that, and that's really important to us as well. But I do devote a lot of time to them, if they're sitting examinations or if we're coaching, or I will spend a lot of time with them, and I will do all the mumsy things, we'll take them to Harry Potter World or whatever it might be. I'll be there for all those key moments, but equally we'll build a relationship where we don't go to the mum guilt thing. It's very easy as a woman in business to go, mum guilt, I've got mum guilt, I'm not there. And yes, we all have those moments, but anytime I have any thought like that, my children tell me there's no way, mum, in the world, because it's about the relationship rather than the amount of time you spend together. And for me, I had to do quite a few things in terms of my thought process, where I knew that I wanted to make an industry impact, but equally have my own family. But I didn't at the time know how I was going to achieve both, how it would work. But I'm a great believer in, if you want both, you go for both. It's not an either or. And as a woman in business, a woman in technology, or from any actually minority background, you have to go for these things, and these things will work themselves out. And for me, I took some very personal decisions around how I managed my family life. I waited until I had my children to know how I would feel before taking any decisions. And for me, and everybody's different, so there is no right and wrong, but for me, my belief was I didn't want a nanny or anyone else that would replace me sort of most of the day as a mum figure. I wanted to kind of disperse that and build that into the sort of family relationships, and be there as much as I can. So that was something I learned, but I walked into it with the belief that, as I say, if you want to go for both, never think it's an either or, and then find your own path as to how that works. It's different for everybody, and equally as a woman, you don't necessarily need to have children either. So it's important to take those decisions in light of what you want from your life and what's important to you, because at the end of the day, you will determine how happy you were with the whole journey. So that's really important.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a conversation in our household at the moment. So I've got an 8-month-old Louis, and Jem, my wife, is a family lawyer, so she's on maternity leave at the moment, and she's looking at, does she want to go back 5 days? Does she want to go back 4 days? What does she want to do? We're looking at the nanny option, the nursery options. Our eldest went to nursery. She said the same thing. I don't want a nanny. It's too much trust in one person. I can't take that risk. So yeah, it's lots. But I think it's some great advice there. I think the most poignant aspect that you mentioned there, for me anyway, is actually have your child, enjoy your child if that's the decision you make, and then see how you feel. Lots of people try and map their whole lives out and think this is how I'm going to feel, and you just don't know, do you? So it's see what works for you.
Absolutely. And the other thing I would say is there's a whole set of thoughts, and I do understand them, and I do feel them, and I have thought about them. The belief that if you take time out for your children, that sort of slows you down or holds you back in your career or anything like that. Having gone through it a couple of times, clearly, I would say actually does quite the opposite. So the time that I took out with my children, I love that time. I cherished that time. I just became mum. Yeah. And that was what I did. And when I came back, I was much more myself, and I excelled much more because I connected more with people. I'd got a lot more out of that experience. I'd learned different things. I'd looked at different approaches. So I'd kind of say, there is a belief set in society that, taking time out could hold you back. The best decisions in my life.
Yeah, I agree. Jem, my wife, went back after Henry and got promoted within a year, and she was a much better solicitor, and especially in being a family lawyer and dealing with financial services and children and so on. And she could relate. She got it. So I think you're right. I think it's really important, and it's really important for lots of other women in technology and women in financial services to hear that coming directly from you as well. So thanks for sharing your thoughts on that.
Pleasure.
To diving back into it, obviously we've been in a global pandemic. We're coming out the other side ish now, which is nice. So just talk me through how the challenges that posed on you, how you got over them, what you did, how you had to act differently. Just talk me through that scenario.
Yeah, again, I smile at society and how we all work, including myself. It's folks are very good at galvanizing to a crisis, right? I mean, the reason lockdown and all of this sort of happened, it wasn't a very nice reason at all, and lots of people have gone through lots of pain, everybody in some way, shape or form. But actually, what we as an organization were able to attain within a few weeks, majority of the organization, 200,000 people plus, were working from home. Everything was operating, just everybody pulled to that particular cause, and we found a way through it. People find a way through it. I guess the difference for me is, if you take that whole skill and you apply it to something like a digitization or a vision, getting folks to galvanize in the same way to a vision is very, very different. So like I say, busting through a lockdown, getting everybody working from home, changing the whole mindset. If you said that sort of 3 or 4 years ago, everybody would say, yeah, all right, yeah. But then you kind of go, well, let's just vision something else. Let's digitize. Let's go and do this thing, and it's a completely different motivational set. But it's possible, because if we can get through a lockdown, we can get through absolutely anything. Yeah,
exactly. So there's your motivational speech. We are recording, so you can use that in the future. How did you deal with, I suppose the easier thing is, I've always said this, is do you think, I've had a lot of conversations say, when there's one common goal and everyone knows that there's a lot on the line, there's a lot at risk, it was easy for everyone to just, not easy, that's harsh, but everyone turned it on. Everyone seems to have done really well and they've performed really well, despite the challenges. Do you think that would have been the case without a global pandemic? Do you think people would have worked as hard at home? Do you think it would have been rolled out? Or do you think there would have been, the odd Friday afternoon, people's skies been off?
I believe you always need something to focus the mind, and it's always good to have something external, something you're driving to. So I do believe that that's important. I do believe in sort of driving through outcomes, and I don't judge where someone's taken an hour here or there. I think it's important to give folks that flexibility, but I do look at the performance and the outcome on the job, so that's really important. But equally, we're all adults in this world. We have to create that trust, but equally, you have to create those boundaries and just check in and make sure everybody's kind of in their lane, if you like. So it is that balance, but having that audacious goal, it's very important, and also breaking that down in terms of what we action today to tomorrow. That's very important as well. And if you've got those aligned, actually you're unstoppable as a team, as a group, as a function, as a company, and it gets very, very exciting when you put all that in place. And there's an art to putting that in place, and there's a way of catalyzing all of that quite quickly. So that to me is the real essence of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you have to deal with much Zoom fatigue?
I just love chatting with people. So like I say, lots of folks are saying, well, there's Zoom fatigue, not Zoom fatigue. I'm kind of like, there's so many hours that I'm not traveling that I'm saving during the day. I get to see my children more, and I happen to be chatting to you and it's on a TV screen. And well, so that's okay. And, hopefully we'll all get out, and we are now, and we get to see folks physically, a handshake and all of those good things. So to be quite honest, I never really thought about it, but I did get a lot of feedback from people about all of these things. And, this is where, well-being and mindset is really, really important, because it's understanding that, and understanding we'll all have these thoughts and feelings at different times. But it, in terms of mindfulness and sort of practicing that self-discipline, really important to sort of do that on a regular basis as part of all that. And that does build that resilience, that energy, that focus, and it gives a little bit of downtime as well, which is all to the good. Yeah,
absolutely. Do you feel like it's changed the future of leadership?
I think it's opened up more leadership opportunities. I don't know if that's a change or not, to be fair, but I do feel there is an opening of all of those elements. I do feel there's a leveling across the world. So the fact that we're all able to work from home, and we're able to visit offices as well, there's a flexibility, but also we do have to be respectful that in some jobs you have to come in and be physically present. And I'm always so respectful and grateful for those folks in our branches or in our call centres, etc., that do need to be there in person in some way, or whether they're looking after the security of the organisation. And those folks have gone out all the way through the pandemic, right? Let's remember that, whether they're in the NHS or they're looking after a branch, actually they deserve the kudos. And the flexibility we get is a bit of an extra, but that really stays with my heart, to be honest.
Yeah, we're incredibly fortunate, aren't we, to be able to almost carry on as normal, but remotely. My brother's a cardiophysiologist, my mum's a nurse, my sister-in-law's a nurse, and they're like, what do you mean working remotely? Like, nothing's changed this whole time we've been working through. And it's like, yeah, we are very fortunate. Or they would say, I don't know that I'm born. So, but hey, cool. Thank you for answering that. Really appreciate that. One thing that, obviously, since getting to know you, your social media aspect, LinkedIn, professional social media aspect of it, do you have a strategy? Is it something you just really enjoy doing? If so, great, tell me about it. And then what's your advice to other senior leaders within the industry?
It's a fantastic question. I've got pulled into social media, to be honest with you. And folks have asked me to get involved in whether it's social media or sort of different speaker events or different things. I have been literally drawn into it. So, I keep a check and balance on all of those things, because I think it's an important part of certainly some of the leadership examples we to demonstrate across the industry. I do have thoughts about how to drive that, and I'll have that in terms of being clear on what I focus on. I do also like to have a bit of fun with it, because you can be very serious with the social media strategy and all of those different things. But who do you remember? You remember the folks that made you smile. So you have to have a bit of fun with it as well. And eventually everyone gets to know you. So there isn't any grand strategy, but there is a massive pull. So I'm very, very careful about what I agree to get involved in, and all of those different things, partly because we all have a finite time on earth, so you have to be really careful where you spend your time, balance the family and all of those different things. But it's important to be involved, right? And particularly during the times where we've been at home, creating that through social media as well. It's just a quite nice way of life, and people know you care, you're listening, you're connected, and you hear these things on social media, and then hopefully through a social platform you make that difference as well. So all of that to the ground. Yeah.
Do you think it will help you with career prospects in the future?
I do believe all of these things help, but it's about all of these things in balance. So it's important to be very, very good at your day job and look after all those things. I think it's important to be out and about and social, and certainly from a well-being perspective, it's really, really important to make sure you are social enough. It's a really good indicator of happiness when you are able to be social and out and about. And even if you're feeling a little bit down, it's good to be a little bit social, because you learn things from different people. It gives you a different perspective, and it's a good well-being piece. So does it help? Yes, absolutely. Is it the be all and end all? No, you have to make sure grassroots, you're making sure you're hitting the results and all of those things. So it's all in balance. It has to be with a little bit of fun. There are some key messages that come through that as well. But again, back to your earlier note, really, Martin, you've got to be your authentic self, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it comes across as well that you like to give back, and it's not just all about work. There's a lot of NED roles on there, or charitable work on there as well. So I think that comes across. I personally think it will help you and help others. A lot of C-level execs out there have got like 5 connections on LinkedIn, haven't got a photo, and they're like, I don't need it, it's before my time. And you're right, obviously, a lot of those individuals will have exceptional reputations and be very good at their day jobs, so it'll be fine. But I think, if it push come to shove and it's a toss up between two, I think that would genuinely help, because there's so much more to see of someone like yourself online compared to a competitor for that potential role in the future. So I think it could be, if it's done the right way, then it could be a good tip for somebody coming up through the ranks in the future.
And it's also a very good way of listening as well. It's important to be on some of these channels, but a lot of social media is about the skill of listening and seeing where the world is at. So it's a great source of feedback as well.
Absolutely. And you're about to launch your own podcast, so tell us about that.
Yeah, exciting times. So the C-Suite Entrepreneur, it is now live and launched. So if you dive into any of the usual channels, so you've got Apple, all the different elements, you can kind of dial in Spotify. You can kind of have a listen. They're meant to be really fun, snackable content in the nicest sense. And sort of aimed at the C-suite audience, but with sort of insights for everybody in terms of their experiences. And it's really aimed at folks in business that want to make that impact in society, want to make that difference, and purpose beyond profit. So there is a commercial aspect to everything, but there's a real social impact that we all have a role to play, particularly on a global and international stage. We can make a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Nice. Well, good luck with it. I'll definitely tune in. Okay, that's my favorite part of the podcast, which is the quickfire questions. So, you ready? 3 pieces of advice you would give your younger self or the next generation coming through.
That's a good one. What would I say? Number one, I would say, don't take yourself too seriously. That's number one. It's not the thing you sort of get from all the interview feedback and all the rest of it, but you have to have fun with it. That's really important. Number two, always be open to learning, and it's learning through different styles. So people look at me, I came from a background that didn't have a normal sort of state school, all different things. I did collect a lot of sort of learnings around university and various degrees and things like that. That's one way of learning. I learn a lot on the job. I learn a lot through other people. I learn a lot through spending time with our customers, our colleagues and all that. So, just be open to learning, but know your own learning style. I think that's the other one. Be open to learning, but know how you learn. And some folks learn through going to university, other folks learn through an apprenticeship. It really doesn't matter. Just know your own style and be really comfortable with it. And there's no need for comparison. Just know how to learn, how you get the best out of learning, but also think about how you accelerate your own learning. So that's something I've spent a lot of time on, the ability to learn, but also that second differential in terms of how do you learn to learn. It's a fascinating conversation to have with yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a visual learner, so whenever I go on courses and everything, if I know there's going to be videos or lots of open discussions and stuff, I know, like, right, okay, I'm going to take this in now. Next question then. 3 resources you use for self-development. Could be books, publications, podcasts, websites, people.
Oh gosh, wow, only 3.
Top 3.
Top 3. Number 1, my children.
Nice.
They are fab because they don't have any predetermined beliefs. They're open-minded and they get you thinking about lots of different things. Yes, definitely. Number 2, so all sorts of social media, journals, all sorts of different things in terms of just that broader world view, whether it be sort of listening to a podcast, all sorts of different things, but very quick. So whereas years ago I used to learn and it would it would take me a while to read something, because I've read so many of these different things in different ways, I can look at something now and go, right, got it. So but that's something to sort of perfect, I guess, and everybody's style is different. And number 3 comes back to number 1, but in a broader sense. So children, people, I learn so much from other people. I learn so much from my team, from my peers, mentors, sponsors, all sorts of different folks. And in that way, just learning from the most unusual places. So folks from different backgrounds, I learn such a huge amount from, because I've got so much respect with their journey in life. Absolutely.
Nice, like it. Okay, brilliant, thank you. And last one, who's your role model and why?
Oh gosh almighty, wow. do you know, I have to come back to, I mean, there are lots of different role models, but I come back to children are actually my role models, because back to a childlike mindset. So I just love the way they think. If you think about, you know, the psychology, the whole thing, you know, when is your most accelerated lifetime of learning? A lot of the time you find it's between the age of 0 and 5.
Yeah.
And that's because you're unfettered, you know that you've got that environment, you're learning into the world. And, you know, if you tap into that mindset, oh boy, is that exciting. And yes, there are some hugely cool people around the world that have like changed the world and all the rest of it. And I could name lots of them in different guises, but that childlike mindset, and therefore children, totally.
Yeah, it's funny. Henry's just turned 5, and for his birthday present from his great nana, he got 3 books that are for 6 to 8-year-olds. So they're the first chunky books he's got, and they're like 230, 240 pages. And he got them last Saturday, and he's finished them. And we're like, "Whoa, okay." We're in like 9 days, and he's finished all of them because he just won't put them down, and he's just so like intrigued. Where the first time he picked it up, he was a bit like, "Oh, there's a few big words in there, I'm not quite sure." And it was just like, okay, sounding it all out, using the skills that he's learned to understand the smaller books are fine. So, and he's just turned 5, and he's absolutely nailed it. So you're absolutely right with that mindset. It's brilliant. Great stuff. Okay, that's it. We've come to a close. It's been an absolutely pleasure to have you on, Dax. I've really enjoyed it. I think you give some great insights and great tips, and there's lots for us to go back on. So thank you very much for joining me and sharing your insights.
Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it, Martin, and thanks for the opportunity.
Great stuff. And I'm sure if anyone's listening and they want to pick your brains, you're open to people messaging you on LinkedIn. They can see your profile on there. But thank you very much and good luck. I'm sure it won't be the last we see, and I'll be tuning into obviously the podcast anyway. So, and to listeners, thanks for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed listening. If you've enjoyed it, please share and pass the pod, but let's not tell Crouchy's legal team I said that. Thanks.